Most leaders we speak to are dealing with one or more of the following. Either too many meetings, eating up, precious time, or meetings that drag on with no real clear purpose, maybe lack of prep or lack of follow-up, leaving things, hanging. Meetings where only a few of the people actually participate and do the talking, maybe endless discussions with no real decisions ever being made. Maybe everyone's talking but no one's really listening, or is it the same people in every meeting saying the same kind of things, so new ideas aren't really coming through? Maybe feeling like you've had a meeting for the sake of having a meeting with no real progress. Have you ever been to a meeting when you thought, this could have been an email? I'm willing to bet that a good number of the meetings that you've had in the last week ticked off at least one of those boxes. Am I right? I'm right. And you know what? That just simply isn't good enough. Meetings should be focused, efficient, purposeful, engaging, solutions-oriented, and designed to actually get results. They should be opportunities to have really deep discussions, and they should make decisions that move the needle. With everything that you and your people have going on right now, you simply can't afford to spend time on meetings that don't move the needle, aren't proactive, aren't getting things fixed. Am I right? I'm right again, aren't I? So I'm Antonio, and today I'm going to be your leadership coach. And over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to chat about how you can transform your approach to meetings, making them significantly more purposeful, significantly more productive, and impactful. I'm going to share with you some strategies to help you create meetings that lead to breakthroughs and drive progress. I'm going to help you to stop managing and start leading. Years ago, I had a pretty senior role at a very large company. It was a top 60 PLC, so you would say a Fortune 60. Anyway, we did a really good job at this organization and the company was sold. So great. So it was time for a few of the senior directors to move on. I found a new role, or it found me rather, I think is probably more accurate. And so I handed in my notice. A couple of days later, I met in the car park the HR director, the VP of HR, and we'll call him Sam. And I said, "Hi Sam, how are you today?" And we had a little chat, and then I said, "So Sam, you probably heard by now I'm leaving." "I did hear," said Sam. "The chairman of the group told me, very sad to see you move on." Now, in that organization, I'm not entirely sure why. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I think it's a good idea. But the lead HR, if ever an executive left the organization or a very, very senior manager, the head of HR, Sam, wrote the reference. Now, I knew that. So I said to Sam, "So Sam, I hope you're going to say something nice about me in the reference." It's odd because they weren't written by, the references for those senior people weren't written by the person you reported to. I'm not sure why. But anyway, so I said, "So Sam, what are you going to say about me?" And he gave it a quick thought. And he said, "Well, actually, Antonio, I'm going to say about you the most positive and developmental thing that I can possibly say about any leader." Now, of course, my interest was piqued. "What's that, Sam?" And he said, "I am going to say in your reference that you are probably the most solutions-oriented leader I've ever had the pleasure of working with." And of course, I was delighted. "Thanks, Sam," said I. And we talked a little bit about why that was and why he thought that and what he saw in me and the things that I did that would make him say such a wonderful thing. Some of the things I'm going to talk to you about in 5 minutes, so sit tight. And I've been thinking about this principle of solutions-oriented or solutions orientation in terms of leadership ever since like 25 years, maybe 30 years perhaps, maybe 30 years, approaching 30 years. I think about it a lot, I train it a lot, I coach it a lot, I teach it a lot, I talk about it a lot. So let's dive into that. Okay, if you think about what is a leader's job, I'll give you a second to think about all of the things that leaders are supposed to do in the normal course of their day, right? What's a leader's job? Now you could write, millions of things. There's lots and lots and lots of things that you could write. You could go to any bookstore and there's miles upon miles of shelf upon shelf, books upon books telling you what leadership's all about. But if you boil it right down, what's leadership about? Well, it's kind of only about a few things. It's about solving problems. That requires solutions orientation, right? It's about making decisions. You get paid to make decisions. And it's about conflict resolution, right? We want to do all of these things. We only have time, effort, and energy to do all of these things. Or we've got two difficult decisions to make. Do we go left or do we go right? You get the idea, right? Those are the few things that leadership's about. Of course, it's about all of those other things that we know, and vision and mission and goals and core values and setting direction and KPI, all of those good things. But really, it's about solving problems, making decisions. And you can't solve problems without making decisions. And conflict resolution. Okay, so I asked Sam. Did I say he was called Sam? That's not his real name. But I asked Sam, well, tell me some of the things that I do that make you want to describe me in that way. Here's a couple of things that he told me. So let's start by thinking about the last board meeting that you went to, or maybe even the last meeting or the last senior meeting. Let's just pretend it was a board meeting. So think back to the last board meeting that you went to, and all of the senior gals were gathered around a table. And then probably there was a little bit about how are you today, the weather and the price of fish, and everybody was going, yes, 2 lumps in my sugar, right? And all of that kind of stuff. And then somebody says, okay, guys, let's get down to business, right? And then the meeting starts. Probably at that point, maybe earlier, maybe a few days beforehand, an agenda was produced. Good, because then everybody knows what it is that they're going to talk about. So when somebody says, okay, guys, should we get down to business? Everybody has their agenda out and they all look down at their agenda and they go, item 1. And then item 1, it might say, for example, Q1 sales results, as an example. And then everybody sits around that table as they talk about the Q1 sales results, and then the next item on the agenda, and then the next item on the agenda, and then the next item on the agenda, and everything kind of gets presented one by one as you work through the agenda. I'm sure that sounds very, very common, very typical to most of you. So you get Q1, then somebody will say, okay, budget update, then somebody will say market competitor analysis, and then somebody will say something else. And basically lots and lots of data gets presented, lots of observations are made, and then we move on to the next thing. You've seen it, you've done it, you've been there, maybe you've led it. Lots of information gets presented, some things get discussed, but nothing really much ever changes. Am I right? I'm right. I'm saying am I right? I'm right a lot today. Okay. So lots of people knowing stuff, but not really lots of people having new stuff to do. Most of those agenda-based, statement-based meetings are 99.9% of the time reporting and then deciding what's next, if anything. Rinse and repeat, go through the agenda, get to the end. Somebody will say, any other business? Somebody will say, we're getting short on time. Somebody will say, okay, let's wrap. Someone will say, I'll circulate the minutes, and everybody leaves. You've seen it 1,000 times. Before we move on, let's think about the principle of statements versus questions. Let's kind of get that into our head for a second. So statements versus questions. When we hear a statement, our brains tend to go into pretty passive mode, into kind of coast mode, right? If you drive a car with a clutch, it's like putting the clutch in, right? And just letting the car coast for a little bit. That's what we do. That's what our brains do when we hear statements. We go into passive reception mode. Our brains say we're going to be informed of something now, like, for example, Q1 sales results, rather than our brain saying, okay, let's get our thinking caps on, we're going to do some work. Okay, you with me so far? Now, statements invite judgment. And basically, we state an issue, somebody talks about it, let's say there are 10 people in the board meeting, one person's talking, and 9 people are kind of going, do I agree with that or do I disagree with that? We're just basically passively making decisions. Do I agree? Do I disagree? Is that right? Is that wrong? Now, when we feel that somebody says something right, we might go, yeah, nice, okay, I get it. When somebody says something wrong, we might say, I'm not so sure. We might say it to ourselves and we might say it out loud. But imagine if instead of a statement, it was on the agenda, it was a question. Now, questions are different from statements because questions light up a different part of the brain. Questions force us into problem-solving mode. Are we coming back to the conversation I had with Sam 30 years ago, right? So questions force us into problem-solving mode. Questions force us to become co-creators rather than just consumers of information. Now, questions, if you think about it, will start to transform the dynamics of the room. Who's involved with the meeting, who's an active participant, and who's an observer, a spectator. I don't know about your business, but my business, we don't have much time for spectators, right? For dead wood just kind of hanging around. We want everybody to be involved in all of the solutions. Okay, good. So if we went from statement to question in our board meetings or senior meetings, would that change the dynamics of the meeting? Would that change who is involved? And actually it would. How do you feel about the principle that every single agenda item is changed into a question? How would that change the dynamic of that meeting? So instead of presenting information, you're actually presenting a challenge, a problem that needs solving, that needs a solution, that everybody needs to get involved with. It's what we call collaboration, right? It's collaborative effort. We go from communication, most meetings, to cooperation, some meetings, the good meetings, to collaboration, the best meetings. Okay, so let me demo it for you. I have down here an example of what statement-based agendas look like and then what the same question-based agenda might look like. See if these resonate with you at all. A traditional board agenda might look like this. I dug this out from, I hoard everything, right? But okay, so let's come back. Item 1, Q1 sales results. Item 2, budget variance report. Okay, standard. 3, market competitor analysis. 4, employee engagement survey results. Sometimes that comes in at number 1. But anyway, it doesn't matter about the order. 5, IT security update. 6, new product launch timeline. 7, risk management review. 8, regulatory compliance status. Okay, so we have 8 items here. Q1 sales, budget, market competitors, employee engagement, IT security, new product launch, risk management, and regulatory compliance status. Now, depending on how well we're managing the time, I've been to so many meetings where we do item 1, Q1 sales results, budget variance reports, and if we're lucky, market competition, and then we don't get to employee IT, new product, risk management, and compliance, right? We don't get to any of those. And so there are 6 people in that meeting who never even get to bring up their own particular department issues, right? Okay, so what's the result of that? The result of that is 8 presentations, minimal engagement, lots of nodding, and yeah, okay, I get it, right? Lots of that going on. Communication, sure. Coordination, maybe. Cooperation, yeah. Collaboration, no, not really. Listen to these. It's exactly the same pieces of information, or rather the same agenda items, just positioned differently. Imagine what the people in the boardroom, how the dynamic would change if it went from the agenda I mentioned 2 minutes ago to this agenda. Item 1, how can we accelerate Q1 sales momentum into Q2? Now that's a question. How do I know? It ends in a question mark. And that question, hey guys, how can we accelerate Q1 sales momentum into Q2? Somebody that's looking after sales will probably say, okay guys, 2 slides. Here's where we are at Q1. Here's our target for Q2. Let's go. And then everybody's involved in how can we accelerate Q1 sales momentum into Q2. Talk about that. Where everybody talks about that. Why? Because now we're solving a problem. We're not just reporting on an issue. Item 2, what budget adjustments will maximize our Q2 performance? Enter the question mark, discuss. Item 3, how should we respond to our competitors' latest moves? Enter the question mark, somebody now reports on our competitors' latest moves, and now everybody talks about how can we respond to that. Item 4, what 3 actions would most improve employee engagement? That's a much better thing to talk about than somebody present employee engagement survey results. I mean, kill me now, right? Versus what 3 actions would most improve employee engagement? And the senior team should talk about that. Number 5, how can we strengthen our security posture without slowing innovation? Man, that's a great question. How can we strengthen our security posture without slowing innovation? Now, we know that we're not just reporting on our IT security posture, we're actually talking about how can we do this without being detrimental on that side. We're solving a problem. 6, what obstacles could derail our product launch and how do we prevent them? Great question. 7, what risks deserve our immediate attention and resources? Great question. 8, how do we turn compliance into a competitive advantage? Man, what a great question that is. Okay, so what's the result of that? Well, the result of that now is 8 collaborative problem-solving discussions or sessions with, I imagine, highly actionable outcomes for more than the person that looks after sales, the person that looks after IT, the person that looks after compliance, the person that looks after HR. Make all of your meetings, instead of agenda items, questions. And then your job in that meeting is to solve those questions. So if they are really good, really intelligent questions, good things will come out of those meetings instead of 8 presentations and 8 people nodding and 7 people thinking, when can I get out of here? Okay, so what happens when you make that shift? Well, of course, first of all, brain shift happens because it's not just passive. Now we're very active, solving problems. The second thing, that changes the energy. The next thing is we're very much more forward focused. How many meetings have you been to when all you really talk about, 90% of the discussion, is in the rear view mirror? So collective intelligence, ownership, creation, solutions, orientation, time efficiency. And by the way, if you can reduce the number of agenda items, that's good too. And we have solutions orientation. We also have action orientation. When we talk in the book and in most of our programs, we say, what's the most valuable resource for a leader? Sometimes when we ask that question, people say, cash. Sometimes people say people, time, money, effort, energy, resources. The most precious resource of any leader is action bias, the preponderance to get stuff done, to move the flag down the beach. And action orientation is a natural consequence of changing agendas, items into questions. Okay. The other thing that we talk a lot about is something called a force multiplier effect. We have other videos on that. Go have a look back. Where force multiplier is when we're looking for something where we can put a little effort in one end and a great result happens on the other end versus the other way around, or even 50-50, right? If you think of it just a teeter-totter or I can't remember what it's called in English. Anyway, in kiddies' playgrounds where somebody sits on one end, somebody sits on the other end, and you do that, right? What on earth is that called in English? But anyway, I spent too long living in America. But you get the idea, right? What we're trying to do with force multiplier is a little effort here and a big result here. This collaborative effect that is forced, it's a natural consequence for changing agenda items into questions and everybody solving those, is a huge force multiplier. So please do it. What happens, if you think about it, the transfer goes from one to many. In other words, one person reporting about the financials to many people listening, right? The force multiplier, instead of going one to many, it goes many fixing the one, right? It goes many to one instead of one to many. That's a force multiplier that we need all of the time as leaders. It's our job to generate those. Okay, let's just take a quick break. I just want to quickly tell you, right, about a new tool that we've developed. It's for the leader who is rather partial to excellence and rather allergic to complacency. And I'm hoping if you're watching this, that's you, right? And it's the Leadership Insights Scorecard. I'll give you a second if you want to write that down. The Leadership Insights Scorecard. All good leadership starts with awareness. Yet here's the thing that we see: so many leaders don't actually have a clear picture of their actual impact in the organization, nor do they know exactly where to focus to get the best results, that force multiplier that I was just talking about, either from their teams or from themselves. Enter, stage left, our scorecard. Now, here's what you do. You answer some simple, not easy, but certainly very thought-provoking questions. And what will you get? Well, you'll get a personalized leadership score and loads of insights for you, particular to you, across 5 key categories. The 5 key categories that all leaders should be concerned about are people development. Of course, we had to develop our people. Company development. That's our job. Self-development, can't make our people and our company better till we make ourselves better. Strategy development, how's that going? And leadership development, we should be making lots of those in our organizations. And genuinely, in around 5 minutes, you'll get a crystal, I don't mean 5 minutes from answering, I mean just answer the questions, it'll take you 5 minutes. Don't let 5 minutes stand in your way, right? You'll get a crystal clear view of your particular strengths, great, but we'll also pinpoint your blind spots. You have them. What are they? You don't know, because they're blind spots. How do I know you have them? Because you have them, I have them, everybody has them, even Colin in accounts. And you'll also get a free downloadable guide. It's free, it's downloadable, and it'll help you improve your most pressing development area. Take the test, get the guide, read it, apply it. Where's the catch? There's no catch. There are no strings attached. You'll get instant insight. It's completely free. You can't afford not to. It's 5 minutes. The more fitting question is, can you afford not to, right? So before we get back to it, if you've even found this, even the slightest, most vague bit useful, or better yet, rather good, I hope, do us a kindness. Hit follow, like, comment. We love the comments, right? Share or pop a well-worded note in the post. That would be great. Whatever suits you, right? It'll take you 2 minutes. It'll help us to help more thoughtful leaders like you find us. Okay, back to the good stuff. For those that need, let's say, lots of proof, lots of models, lots of data to back what I've just been talking about in terms of changing all of your agenda items into questions, I'm going to give you 2 models. The first model I'm going to give you is William Kahn's employee engagement theory. That's really what we've been kind of talking about, employee engagement theory. It was first published in 1990, so a little while ago. It stood the test of time, right? He was from Boston University. He did this original research that basically what he was trying to figure out is, well, what does employee engagement mean? What does it look like? How do we build it, right? And if you can't get employee engagement, or rather if you can't get engagement from your senior managers, your senior directors, man, you're kind of pushing water uphill, right? But in his 1990 study, William identified 3 psychological conditions, and actually a couple of them are very en vogue at the moment in leadership. Okay, so the 3 are, if you want to write them down, first one is psychological meaningfulness. It's a mouthful, but basically, do people find this kind of work worth their full investment? Well, most of the board meetings I used to go to, the answer to that is no. Okay, number 1. Number 2, psychological safety. Aren't you hearing a lot about psychological safety at the moment? Seems to be a big thing that everybody's talking about. Basically, here's the thing. Do people feel safe enough to express themselves properly. I can't tell you the number of people in organizations that we see that don't feel safe enough to express themselves properly. Why? Because every time they've expressed themselves in the past, somebody's either told them they were wrong, or they've huffed and they've puffed, or the eye rolling begins, or they even get told off and forced back into their box. You've seen it. You haven't done it, but you've seen it. And then the third thing is William Kahn called the psychological availability. What does that mean? Have I got the bandwidth to engage with this thing at the moment? So let's come back, and the answer to that often is no. Why? Because everybody's in the urgent, not important box. Eisenhower's matrix. Prioritization. Video that we talked about in the past, go check that out. But look, let's think about meaningfulness for a second, right? The first part of the model. Meaningfulness. A statement like, here are the Q1 results. Okay. Present, slide, deck, report. That's okay. Information transfer has very low meaning to people. A question, how can we accelerate Q1 momentum, which is the question we asked earlier, that's now problem solving. Well, what is the difference between problem solving and information? Problem solving gives high meaning to something. By asking questions, meaningfulness goes up. Statements, which is what most agendas look like, they're passive, and people are afraid of asking stupid questions. So that comes back to this safety piece, where questions, you are inviting people to contribute. Well, when you invite people to contribute, then safety goes up because you're just, you're being asked to say. And then availability. A statement, mental energy goes down. I mentioned that earlier, becomes very passive. All you do then is listen and judge, right? Whereas questions hit a different part of the brain. The mental energy goes to actively problem solving. Do you remember the thing that we talked about with me and Sam 30 odd years ago? Okay. The other model you might want to check out, which we won't dive into today, but the other model you might want to check out is Beck's cognitive behavioral triangle, CBT model. Probably heard about that a lot at the moment. Aaron Beck. In this, he says, look, this model shows how people cycle through thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And they keep cycling through thoughts that lead to feelings, and then the feelings lead to behaviors, and the behaviors lead to thoughts, right? You can all imagine that, right? That little triangle. Now, statement-based meetings, those item 1 on the agenda, Q1 results, item 2, right? That stuffy old thing. Passive thoughts. What do passive thoughts lead to? Well, disconnected feelings. What do disconnected feelings lead to? Passive behaviors. What do passive behaviors lead to? Passive thoughts, right? Downward spiral. It's turtles all the way down, as we like to say, right? But questions-based meetings, we have a solutions focused. The thoughts lead to the energized feelings. What do energized feelings lead to? Active behaviors. Now everybody's joining in the meeting. What do active behaviors lead to? More creative thoughts. Now it's turtles all the way up, if there is such a thing. I think I've just invented a new phrase, right? So a question that's forward focused, which is how do we ... instead of what is the ... right? That's forward focused. That's what Sam said that he liked about my MO, because I was forward focused. Great. He also said I asked lots of solutions-seeking questions. What would it take, guys? What would it take to ... instead of why can't we ... My wife says there are some people who have a problem for every solution. It's the opposite of that I'm talking about. The other thing Sam says is you ask lots of resource-based questions. Well, what's a resource-based question? It is what existing strengths, opportunities do we have that could leverage this in order to ... It's that force multiplier again, which is what leaders are looking for all of the time. He says you ask the innovation question. What would this look like if we reimagined it completely? In our book, don't know if you can see behind me, we talk about loads of those insights, right? What would it look like if we reimagined it completely? Go have a look at some of our other past videos. We talk about that a lot. And then the collaborative question. What can I do to help? How can I share not only what I can do, how can I share my resources, right? Who else should be working on this, thinking about this with us? Okay. let me wrap. Change all of your, please be brave enough. Just do it for, let's say, 30 days. Okay, so the first thing is take every agenda you see and change every statement into a question, a smart one that's going to get everybody in the room thinking. That's the first thing. Start every meeting. You know what the agenda looks like, so start every meeting by saying, hey guys, we're here today to answer these questions. Read out those questions straight away. Don't just go 1, 2, 3. Answer them straight away. Get people marinating on what the answer might be, even if it takes us an hour to get there. Okay? Number 3, tell team members that you expect them to bring into that meeting solutions, not just information. Another thing we talk about in the book. Information is a subset of data. Data is huge. Information is somewhere in all of that data. Most companies, there's no shortage of data. What there's a shortage of is information. Somewhere in that data is information. We've got to get to that information. Then somewhere in that information is kind of knowledge, is wisdom. Somewhere in that is insight. We've got to take the data and figure out the insight. And that's leadership's job. This is one of the ways to do it. And then do it for a month. And then think about what does to get people, give them a month to get into the groove of it, right? The first one might be clunky, a little bit difficult. I'm asking you to persevere. By the time a month has elapsed, I want you to think about what are the outputs, what are the outcomes of these meetings now compared to the meetings that we used to have beforehand. And if you don't see a significant, well, you just will, right? So, okay. So, here's the job for you. Before your meeting, you're the leader. If you're the chair of this meeting, here's the job for you. First one, using Kahn's assessment. Remember we talked about that a minute ago? Look at the agenda. Will your people find this agenda purposeful and worth their time investment? If the answer is no, think about the agenda, right? Safety. Number 2, safety. Are these positioned in such a way that people will feel safe to contribute their perspectives? And when you hear it, will you behave yourself, right? It's part of emotional intelligence, impulse control. That's another video that we've talked about. Then finally, availability. Will people's minds be fully engaged rather than passively receiving when you look at this agenda? And if the answer is yes, terrific. Now, that's before the meeting. Now, during the meeting, we go back to Beck's model. This is you as the leader. During the meeting, thoughts. Are people actively thinking about solutions rather than passively being fed information? If the answer is yes, great. Feelings. Number 2, do people seem engaged? Do people seem this important? Or do they seem disconnected? And if you're seeing that they're disconnected, you've got to do something about it. Then the third thing is behaviors. Are people actively, is everybody actively contributing and collaborating, or just consuming, absorbing, and judging? If you see that going on, you've got to call it out. Okay, last thing. When you notice statement type modality, right, statement type modeling, say this. Okay, guys, we've gone off track. The question that we need to answer here is ... right? Okay. Invite engagement. What perspective do we need on this? What new perspective do we need on this? That's a good question. Next one, how, guys, should we approach this challenge to give us a completely different outcome? Okay, now here's what's going to happen very quickly before I go. This thing will start to cascade and ripple around the organization. When you start running better meetings, guess what? All of the people in your meeting are going to start running better meetings. That's a great force multiplier, because guess what? You're not in every single meeting, thank God, I hope, right? And all the people that you're now leading these senior meetings, they see what good looks like. They're going to replicate that around, and suddenly the speed of everything is going to increase, right? So in other words, when leaders start asking thought-provoking, intelligent, solutions-oriented questions, so does everybody else, because that stuff is cascaded from the top down. The entire culture of the organization shifts from tell me to let's figure it out together. When you get to that point, you cracked it. Okay, so pick your next meeting and make a start. Now, last thing to think about. We might do a whole video on this. I think we will. If you then want to take from good to great, which is what we've just done, to stratospheric, if that's even a thing, we're then going to start to score your meetings. Wow, great topic for another day. But for now, I think that's all we're going to say, right? So a big thank you for being here as always. Thank you for getting to this point. I hope this episode offered something of value. One tool, one tip, one idea, 1%. Remember, immense power in marginal gains applied consistently over time, right? Einstein said compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, right? Last thing, please like, follow, subscribe so you don't miss out on episodes just like this, and tell us in the comments. Okay, that's it. I'm Antonio Garrido for My Daily Leadership. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, by wisdom and effort, go change your meetings. See ya.